Hello. Ooh, oh. I got the timing wrong there. Using an iPad, I usually use my computer, but it's been turning off randomly recently, so using this device instead. Let's try again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 36th episode of The State of Craft. My name is Sammy. I'm your host. I'm the CEO of Certicraft. We're on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive in the regulated market. We do that primarily through the simplest seed-to-sale compliance software available on the planet. And if you are curious about that, we'd love to hear from you. The State of Craft is a podcast to discuss the state of the legal craft cannabis industry. As anybody in the industry knows, there's a whole bunch of bullshit we have to deal with, and it's not a system of policies across all the frameworks, local, federal, provincial, that allows people to survive, let alone thrive. So, a big part of the mission of this podcast is to bring those issues to the forefront, bringing guests who are quite opinionated and knowledgeable and experienced in various domains related to policy, to have discussions about what the problems really are and to brainstorm solutions and just to get some really healthy, more public discourse going around the challenges in our industry. Today, I am. No, I'm going to switch the order of what I was about to say. For those of you who are here, we'd love it if you said hello in the chat. I am on an iPad today, so the chat's a little harder to see, so I probably won't be interacting as much there, but I know Nick will be and a bunch of other people will be. So please say hi in the chat if you are here or comment throughout. That makes it a lot more fun when we have that interaction going on. If you have any questions for either myself or Adolfo and Jeff, who I will introduce in a few minutes here, we have a dedicated questions tab where you can go ask questions. You can upvote the questions that you also want to hear an answer to, and then at the end, we'll go through questions in the order of most upvoted. So with that housekeeping out of the way, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement, and then I will introduce Adolfo and Jeff and ask them to say a thing or two about themselves. I live in Nelson, BC, and when I moved here a few years ago, I was pretty surprised that I basically only saw white people here, and maybe every once in a while a brown person. And there was no indigenous population that I saw. And for my first year or two here, I was like really confused. And anytime I'd get to know somebody a bit better, I'd ask them, hey, like who had lived here for a while, I'd be like, hey, why don't I see indigenous people around here? And across the board, everybody's always like, huh, I never thought about that. I don't know. And eventually I met a woman named Stephanie. She created the Green Team trimming company in the cannabis space, who worked with the local Sinaiaks people. That's the land on which I live here, on unceded territories of the Sinaiaks people. And she had an answer for me. She was like, oh, the reason you don't see indigenous people is because they were all murdered. and that's a big part of the history here. There used to be thousands of Sinaiaks people living on the land that I'm on here today. And in the 1800s and early 1900s, there were some scalping programs that led to the complete decimation of that group of people. Today, there's less than 10 Sinaiaks people in this area that we're on. There are more Sinaiaks people down south of the border in the U.S., but not the local bands that were once thriving in this area. There's a lot of bullshit that they dealt with here from colonial culture and history. For example, the federal government or the BC government or both declaring them extinct in the months leading up to needing approvals for a bunch of dams they were about to build, so that they wouldn't have to go through that approval process and be able to just build dams without honoring the treaties that existed with the local people. It's a continuous battles for the Sinaiaks people and for many other First Nations throughout Canada. And I encourage you, whoever you are, to learn about the history of the first peoples on the land that you're on. That's the first step to any meaningful reconciliation. So whoever you are, wherever you're coming from, if you don't know the history of the land that you're on, please take the time to learn that, because that's the first step to actually getting to actual reconciliation, instead of the more superficial reconciliation that's often pushed in in our society and in our political sphere. Not to say that there isn't real work being done. There are some people who really do care about stuff, but more often than not, a land acknowledgement is just like, I live on the unceded lands of the Snakes people in the Chinaha. There, pat myself on the back. I did my job, which does nothing, you know. So, so yeah, I encourage all of you to get to know the cultures you are on. All right, I will shift gears. I could ramble and rant about that kind of stuff for a long time, but today we have the honor of having two lovely gentlemen here, Adolfo and Jeff. Um, who both have a history of working hard to further consumption lounges and having them be a more legitimately accepted thing and legal thing that is an avenue that exists for cannabis culture here in Canada today. Huge part of cannabis culture historically to have a lounge where people can come together and enjoy the plant together and celebrate culture together. And that's all I'll say for now. I would rather have each of our guests introduce themselves both personally and the companies and organizations that they're involved with. And then we'll launch into a discussion from there. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Adolfo. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to have you guys here. Adolfo, you want to go first? Introduce yourself?
Sure. I guess I better do my own land acknowledgement for the Musqueam, the Snailotooth, and of course the Squamish. So I'm going to start also by saying thanks to all of the local people here who have supported me in getting to my new spot here in Book Club. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you kind people. So I'm Adolfo Gonzalez. I moved here uh, 2001 from Mexico to start growing cannabis under the federal system. It was the first year you could grow cannabis legally. So I've been a cannabis activist, a grower, a breeder, a retailer, a researcher for many years now. So yeah, that's me. Hey.
Thanks, Adolfo. And do you want to maybe, before we move on to Jeff, do you want to maybe tell us briefly what Book Club is?
Yeah, of course. Book Club is an IP and community. It's a company that does a lot of different things. It's very unique, and it's going to take me a little bit of time to explain to the audience exactly what Book Club is. But hold tight on it. It's my new company, and it's focused on the inclusion of traditional cannabis culture and traditional members of the cannabis community, and trying to incorporate that knowledge into the legal sphere a lot more effectively. And this space is part of that. Okay, so that's what I'll leave it at for now. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm sure we'll hear more as the night goes on, or morning rather. Jeff, want to introduce yourselves?
Hello, I own Borum Beyond and another accessory company called True Core. It's just kind of high-end accessories for concentrate consumption. We do dab bars and pretty much everything to tie the whole concentrate and vaping experience together. I myself love concentrates. I mean, that's no secret. I go around telling everybody how much I love, cannabis concentrates. But taking it all the way back to the beginning, 2015, we were really frustrated being cannabis consumers ourselves. Adolfo knew me back in 2013 and literally how much concentrates I dabbed like all the time, even back then. And, I wanted a really good experience. And I saw all these American shops having, 100% American glass made by these crazy artists. And seeing all these artists in Vancouver, I had to have my own gallery because there was nobody, not even a smoke shop in Vancouver, was supporting, dozens of artists that had all these studios and like underground glass blowing, almost like layers, you know what I mean? But fast forward to 2015 to 2018, we had a retail gallery. We were the first in Canada to be 100% Canadian glass. We had no import glass, so we took that head on. And then now fast forward to today, we went full online doing wholesale in 2018. So we work with about 15 different shops just in BC alone. Our True Quartz accessories are in 50 shops across Canada and the United States, and also a distributor in Barcelona. So we're continuing to try and grow and deliver products and experiences that are really kind of tying the whole concentrate experience together, because people love flower. I used to love flower before I used to smoke so much. Like I just can't smoke it anymore because my lungs don't want me to, which is why I use a lot of concentrates. Like, I mean, I love flower, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't love me. So um, I have always kind of been ahead of some kind of curve with concentrates because it was such a niche, right? Like super high end glass for a super niche product is like, you know, a super niche, right? So essentially what I would like, we've kind of just been waiting in the wings until concentrates in the legal market have been, you know, widely accepted, because, you know, we had one or two shops back in 2018. They're like, why the heck do we need, you know, dab rigs and like, you know, these attachments like bangers to take dabs off of? And they're like, you know, and I'm like, oh, just wait, you know. And now even the BCLDB is like getting glass off of us for their stores, you know. So it's kind of like heartwarming to see how widely accepted these glass artists' work, you know, have been just in everybody's collection now, and that's like the ultimate goal, you know.
And just for anybody in our audience who maybe doesn't have as much experience with cannabis and isn't making the connection here, when Jeff's talking about dabbing and concentrates and the contrast with smoking flower, it specifically
Out
is
of a piece like
vaporization.
this.
So everything's being vaporized. So you're getting vapor in your lungs as opposed to smoke in your lungs. So just want to make sure that's clear for anybody who might not have cannabis experience.
So here's an example of a piece that is actually sold recently. This is made by a guy that's out in. I don't want to get this wrong. He's out in New Brunswick. I said Nova Scotia on the last podcast, and I felt terrible about that. So, but yeah, this is his name's Grassblower. He's a really talented artist, as you can see. Just amazing work.
Grass blower. That's a great name for a glass
That's
blower
like
artist.
it's like the perfect like the, you know, he blows glass and he also blows grass, right?
Cool, guys. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. Yeah, I'll just start off with kind of an open-ended question of what do you see as the landscape for consumption lounges today in Canada?
Well, I mean, I'll start if you want, Jeff.
Sure.
I think that we have some spots in Vancouver, for example, that are the most, you know, we have to pay heed and probably start the conversation from there from the historical roots of the movement, right? And although Mark Emery is a very controversial figure, as well as a lot of the people that are involved with that pop block, we have to pay heed to the fact that Emery, the people from Blunt Brothers, I don't know, I'm not going to name names because I know that Emery's a public figure. He doesn't mind being called out, his name being called out. I don't know, Blunt Brothers, peeps from Blunt Brothers, people from Amsterdam Cafe, right? And of course, like I'm just going to come out and say it, the Angels. The Hells Angels have been instrumental to creating the organizational structure with the city of Vancouver. I'm just going to go out and say that. Historically, the Hells Angels, that is their territory. If it wasn't for the fact that that is the Hells Angels territory, that those arrangements could have been made historically, way back in the day, who knows how long ago, you know? That is like stuff that's historic, right? And
so, sorry to interrupt you for a moment. What kind of arrangements are you talking about? Like this is
I'm talking about the fact that the Hells Angels have been, and a lot of Canadians wouldn't like to acknowledge this, but the RCMP has had a level of acknowledgement with the operations of the Hells Angels in this city and in this country, where they're not treated the same as a lot of other gangs. Okay, like when the Hells Angels are doing work, and frankly, like I've done lots of business with the Hells Angels in the past because I've been a cannabis grower, broker, et cetera, et cetera. I'll openly say that. And I'll have to say that, like, my interactions with the organization have been, these people have been very businesslike and have actually, dare I say, good reputations on the street. They pay their bills. They aren't out to hurt anybody. They, in fact, don't like people hurting each other on the street. They try to keep people from going at each other because that costs them money, man. That locks down the street. So a lot of these consumption spaces came out of the fact that, like, there was already weed being sold in those areas. Okay. Different gangs control different areas. Even to this day, anybody who's, see, I lived in the downtown east side for a decade and I worked there for a decade, and I'm Those are my kind of my roots in this community. So I like know this stuff better than most. And for me, I have a lot of respect for certain things that certain gangs, not just the Hells Angels, have accomplished historically in this city. And one of the very positive things that they've done for us has created the social circumstances where that kind of behavior would be permissible by the police. And they would just turn a blind eye and say, fuck, let them do it. Because those areas were already full of fucking opiates and weed and all kinds of crazy shit was going down over there. And consumption lounges wasn't like at the top of the bill to take down. Plus, it was being run by people that they kind of already knew what was up. They knew that they're not like people that are going to be selling fucking heroin up there or anything, right? It's weed people. So they like, just leave the weed people alone, right? And so what I'm saying is that like the Angels were a lot of the people, and this happened in the States too. I spent a lot of time in New York, Albany. I spent a lot of time in what they call the lot. The lot is an open drug market which takes place in the streets of New York City, of Albany, and different parts of East Coast, where Fish plays. People follow around this band called Fish, and it's the only place in the United States where you're going to see people yelling on the street, hashish, marijuana, LSD, MDMA, because there's been arrangements with those cities for a long time where when that show happens, this is what's going to happen on the street. You want to come bust us? Bring it on, but we're going to do it anyways, right? And frankly, the police say, yo, do we want to take on like an organization like the Angels back in the day? No, they didn't, dude. No, in the 70s, if you read the books, which I like to read, and I like to recommend the Electric Kool-Aid Acid test by anybody who hasn't read Tom Wolfe. Go out there, read some Tom Wolfe for yourself. Read up on the history of how the Hells Angels have been involved in building the drug culture in all of North America. And anybody that's like, oh, gangs are all bad and their impact is only bad on society, I'm sorry, but you're fucking wrong. Straight up. And secondly, Hells Angels is a great case study for, dude, I'm not saying that it's not still, they do stuff. I'm not going to speak beyond that. But what I'm going to say is that, like, to say that, and the same thing with a lot of the narcos in Mexico, same thing. You want to say that it's just bad? That they have no revolutionary aspect to them, that they're not trying to bring new things that we couldn't have done before and push the boundaries of what's acceptable in society and actually create spaces for certain members of society that would be called an outcast to have a home. If you can't see that, well, I know a lot of people that don't come from the street, they're not going to see that, right? But I'm going to tell you that this consumption lounge tradition would not exist if it wasn't for the opiate dens before all the weed consumption lounges started in the 90s and in the 80s, okay? And then when I moved here 2001, there was a place called the Kine, right here on Commercial Drive. It was called the Kine. The Kine is a slang that comes from Hawaii. That's how you say weed, okay? And basically, I went there as a kid from Mexico, man. I was already deep into drug culture. My parents were very hippie-ish. I came already with like peyote culture, mushroom culture, ganja culture already deeply ingrained into me, right? And then I saw what they were doing at the Kine, what they were doing down there, what Emery was doing. I could go into the store, buy my peyote. I could go into the store, buy my seeds. I could go into the store and fucking learn from amazing people that I would have never been able to meet otherwise. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I knew right then and there, dude. I was in college. I was studying psychology. I was studying anthropology. I was doing all the shit. But I knew that no matter what I did in school, I was going to come out and I was going to do that. Because what I saw there, dude, was a level of freedom, a level of people being people. Ganja is such a natural human thing that's been denied to us for so many fucking hundreds of years now, man. And we've got all this pent up, dude, our ancestors did it. Our ancestors' ancestors did it. We've been doing since the dawn of time. This plant has been our companion since the dawn of time. And we've been denied access to this very instinctual thing to us that when I came, you know, in my family, both my mom and dad, I grew up watching them consume ganja daily and being very healthy humans, people that I admired a lot compared to a lot of my other parents, friends' parents that had more money and maybe more successful. But my mom and dad were intellectuals and built themselves and people that I still love and have a very deep connection with today. And I don't think that my mom and dad would be the same people if it wasn't for ganja in their life. It makes you think. In Mexican society, it makes you think very differently. It connects you to different currents. You're connected to native currents, and you have to be getting that good shit, and you gotta talk to people rich people never fucking talk to and never associate with, right? So like, it opens up a whole nother world to you, and it makes you understand that this world that we call the criminal world, we're putting this one word on something that's incredibly complex and multidimensional. And consumption spaces, man, are the rebirth and the officialization of this culture that's been there for a long time. And you know something, guys, that we're also observing that in the world of cannabis production and the world of cannabis retail. Maybe retail, I have to hold my breath because things are still panning out there. But in the world of cannabis production, all the people that came that weren't doing things in the legit traditional way, the way that our culture does it, they're not surviving, right? Yeah. So that's what's happening right now with consumption lounges. We have a rebirth of something that's ancient, and the people that want to do it really like Apple Store or want to get the license and start, want to get the license once the movement has developed, there's going to be all kinds of people that do this kind of thing where I'm sitting right now with all kinds of looks, all kinds of vibes. But book club and a lot of the stuff that Jeff is doing, that's why I'm so glad Jeff is here. This is heady, cultural. When I say heady, I mean it comes from the heads. It comes from the ganja lovers. It comes from people that really, 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 like, it's a lifestyle. Like I have been surviving because of this plant since I was very young. It's been paying my bills for a long time, and it's been keeping me healthy for a long time, off of opiates for a long time, reducing my dependence of alcohol for a long time, which is a big problem in my country. So, you know, when people see something like book club, I think that they're like, oh, like, is that illegal? Oh, what are you doing? Is that, you know, how risky is that? And I'm like saying, you know, first of all, this is something that for me is very normal. And Jeff knows this, I've been running spaces like this on and off since, like a decade ago.
Forever.
For a long time. And the city has known what I've been doing. And I used to have a very close relationship with the city of Vancouver. Councillor Jang was he was the councillor for the downtown east side when I was doing operations in that area. Shout out Councillor Jang. If it wasn't for Councillor Jang, a lot of changes would not have happened in the city of Vancouver. And the only reason that I had a chance to be part of that is because they knew how I ran my spaces. I like send them reports to be like, look, these are the SOPs for my space. And dude, Jeff knows this. I would write look, my job, man, was for 2 years, was to write papers and make phone calls and write emails and hold events that I would like tell the sergeant. Sergeant was on a speed dial because I was the first club that we put like all kinds of cameras, all kinds of security systems, and the crime went down hardcore in my block, right? So the sergeant comes down to talk to me, and he's like, Adolfo, what the fuck are you people doing here, man? I'm like, yo, first thing, we put up cameras. So your cops, if there's like somebody that gets stabbed or robbed, they can come to me, they can get footage, and I don't like hold that footage back. I give them, somebody's committing a crime on my block, I want you guys to deal with that person, right? I'm not a criminal, yo. I'm providing a service that's very necessary. And I'm also going to write up case studies. I'm also going to write up case studies where I'm going to talk about the patients that come to use this space to make it clear that, look, for example, and Jeff also knows this about me. I'm a patient. I've had like a script for a long time in Canada. I went through a sequence of
script is in prescription.
A prescription, yeah, that's how we call it on the street. Okay. Yeah, the script. I've been using cannabis instead of opiates for a long time. I live in an apartment where I can't smoke weed, okay? Not only me, but most people that are middle to low income in Canada, we don't have the money to have the space, big house with a big yard with neighbors that don't give a fuck. Okay, we don't have that luxury. The government needs to understand that that's what I've been doing this, just like everything else I did. And like for any regulators out there, I'll remind you, I was the guy behind the first opiate substitution publication in Canada. So I went and I got the funding for that. Shout out to Eden Medicinal Society. I worked with Dr. Paul Hornby for the course of 2 years to work with people that were on the street using heroin and also methadone, and determining how much we could decrease their reliance on these drugs through the use of a standardized cannabis capsule. And that's how I started working with the city of Vancouver. They took note of that publication, which was peer-reviewed and published in the IACM. So point being that the way that these things happen, right, is for them to happen grassroots, to create paperwork around what you're doing. I already know that right now I'm on a corner that's like ripe with crime. People get their cars broken into, their houses broken into all the time. Just like my old spot at Main and Hastings. This spot that I have is the perfect spot to demonstrate the societal impact of what a consumption space does. Patients get a place to consume. I don't have to go bother my fucking neighbors all the time. I don't know if the city of Vancouver wants me to stand on my porch with a child that lives above me, an old person that lives below me in my apartment building and puff on my fucking joint that I need for medical reasons. Oh, and it so happens that I have arthritis. So then you want me to go out of my house in the winter and stand in the cold with arthritis in my knees, and that's what the city wants me to do. That's what the province wants me to do. I don't think so, because I've spoken to the province, and I know that the province is full of reasonable people. I don't think that the province really understands the impact of our current policies, and they don't understand the potential positive impact of building these types of spaces into our society in a legal way. Jeff, mic drop. You.
Yes.
Wait. Before you take over here, Jeff, I just want to say I was not expecting that whole spiel that you went on there. I've learned so much in just that 10 minutes there. Like I've never gangs have never been brought up before. Gangs are very commonly thought of in the way that you described, of like
It's a history lesson,
So it's very fascinating to kind of like hear other perspectives around kind of the positive impacts that they might have had on culture and on society in different ways. And I'm very thankful that you're willing to be so open about your history and your experience.
And you want me to tell you something else? That I think that there's a serious element of civil disobedience in those agreements. Those agreements are not like necessarily like the Angels are actively paying somebody off in City Hall. Those agreements are historical standpoints where two people went head to head and they said, look, motherfucker, come get me. And the city was like, no, bro, we're not going to go there. And they were like, okay, then we're going to do our thing and we're going to do it right. We're not going to fuck with our neighbors. We're going to stick to one block. We're going to do our thing, right? That's what I mean by arrangements. Arrangements is like a fucking understanding that's been there for decades now, that is under the rug, that's never been spoken of, that is now is the time to talk about this shit. Because most of the Angels are now OGs and they're not even active and they're part of our community. So they're business people. So
I'm just in a sense though, like just to kind of I'm glad that someone like you, Adolfo, can have those conversations that might make other people feel difficult or uncomfortable, because you got to have that unbiased conversation about where we came from. Of course there's gangs, of course there's Hell's Angels, and I see in the comments here, it's not like we're in the comments celebration of illicit operations. We're not celebrating it. That's where we came from. Look at where we're going. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago. And to carry it on to another positive note, I've known Adolfo for 10 years now, and we used to jam music in the basement of Eden. I used to take dabs, and I'm pretty sure Adolfo served me dabs once or twice, like back in the day, and it's one of those things that you have to push the boundaries. You have to do that civil disobedience. You need to have these people out there in the trenches doing the things that'll get them arrested, that or might get them arrested, will get them negative looks from society, because eventually it'll be normalized. My dad was super against cannabis and any form of it, any form of smoking, and then last Thanksgiving I served him his first dab in his life, and to be able to go from where we were to where we are now, we just need to keep pushing. We need to have people like Adolfo, people like me, people like other people that are doing similar things, saying, hey, like, cannabis really isn't as harmful as you think it is. And to kind of bring it into my next point here, is that's kind of just like where I'm coming from now is licensable lounges and consumption spaces are the last puzzle piece of legalization. Besides the gatekeeping for producers, there needs to be less restrictions on the whole lounge and consumption space part. And like we've been doing, like we're in Coquitlam and we've been doing, the trench work. We joined the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce. We've been going to meetings with the mayors and like councilors, not meetings, but more like, set up like social events and networking things that we can, get a chance to pitch a question. And, I'm every single time it's always, look, we need lounges and consumption spaces. We'll come at it as vaping to start out with, and then you government people can have a place where you can concentrate your marketing efforts. We can have people that are trained to prevent adverse reactions. So there's harm reduction. There's, there's no need for any sneaking around. You can have, work safe. You can have, insurance. You can have everything that you need to, like an event space or a bar, even if it's a place that they don't yet serve cannabis, like book club. People just come with their own and enjoy it and have a space to network and connect or just socialize. And it really is the missing piece of the puzzle. I mean, all the stakeholders, from the people that want to consume, you have people that are in stratas. They're smoking on sidewalks. They're going to parks because they, like Adolfo said, they can't smoke inside. It's very restrictive to people that want to be able to consume. So being able to have a space that people can go, it's a win for those people. For the people that don't smoke or just absolutely hate cannabis, I don't understand why, but that's still people in society like that. But even them, they get to have all the people that they can smell smoking cannabis in the stratas and the parks and the sidewalks. They can all have a spot to go and away from the people that don't like it. The government, like I said, has a place that can concentrate their marketing efforts. So don't consume too much, wait 2 hours before you eat more edibles, those kinds of things like you see in bars, like don't drink and drive. It's a place where people can concentrate. Instead of having everybody drive to a friend's house and then drive home afterwards, you can have, an Uber or a taxi and safer ways for everybody. It just seems to me stupid that there's no framework put in. And to me, I don't consider them illegal. I just think that the government's too behind and they're too slow and they don't know what they're doing. And they need somebody like a 5-year-old to put it in front of them and say, hey, I wrote all the bylaws for you. I wrote all the regulations for you. I talked to WorkSafe. I talked to these people. Now this is a framework. All I need you to do is sign off on these freaking documents so we can finally have what seems to be the biggest no-brainer that people need. It's just having an event where you can post bills on the billboards and say, hey, we have this event 19 plus at this cannabis consumption space. It just opens up so many possibilities. There's wasted and lost tax and tourism dollars that are just pouring down the drain because they can't seem to get their crap together to write the regulations and policies to make this happen, just because and they themselves have basically admitted it to me. It's not worth it for them because what are they going to get out of it? And that's just where politicians come from, is that what's in it for them. And if either we can spin it for them, either spoon feed it to them like they're a 5-year-old, or write the policy, then I think that's kind of the next step, I feel.
I've got a question for you, Jeff. Before I get there, I just want to
rant over.
Yeah.
I just want to respond to Cameron, what you're saying there. I think you're completely misunderstanding what Adolfo was saying. I don't think he was celebrating criminal organizations. I don't think he was celebrating illicit operations. I think he was just being real about the history and just sharing, no, in order to be able to talk about where we're at now, we have to first talk about the history and understand where it's at. I didn't get the sense that Adolfo was like, yay, I love the Hells Angels throughout his spiel there,
No,
There's a very big difference between celebrations and just having a real conversation about the history that got us to where we are today. So just want to state that.
there's always a difficulty in painting history in multiple colors, and especially when that history connects to our current day, right? These organizations still exist, And a lot of people have a very black and white way of looking at that world, and they will always, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's very important to elucidate the historical roots of any movement and to acknowledge that and to say, you know what, there's this story that's untold that is important for us to recognize, because civil disobedience has all kinds of different factions in it. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the very, very important and foundational factions to the Canadian scene, no matter how uncomfortable it might make us. And I also want to acknowledge that there's currents of white supremacy. There's currents that are a negative inside of that organization in particular that I completely do not agree with. The issue is when we deny the past. And I want to also say something about really quick about the Kine again. Don and Carol, when they did that outside of the pot block in Vancouver, it was the first establishment in Vancouver outside of course, the Compassion Club, which is right next door to me here on Commercial Drive. Compassion Club, I believe, had to be closed. The city closed them, I believe. Okay. Compassion Club was the second oldest club in Canada. Okay. The oldest club in Canada was the Victoria Buyers Club, which is still run and still being raided by the police to this day. So a lot of people would call the Victoria Buyers Club criminals, and I would not call them criminals. And a lot of people would say, how dare you celebrate the history of the BC Compassion Club and of Ted and what he's done on the island with Victoria Buyers Club? And I would say, well, we've been called criminals our whole lives. Our whole lives I've been called a criminal, and my story and the stories of my community have been very quiet. And, no, we're not gangs, and no, we've never been violent, and none of us have a violent history, unlike a lot of the people in, for example, the Hells Angels. But equally, we were deemed criminals, and people need to understand that. That when somebody says to me, I can't handle the celebration of criminal, well, we need to acknowledge that the word criminal in our society is used as a one-sided coin, supposedly, that is not. It is a concept that changes over time, that evolves over time.
If I may interject here, let's not forget that cannabis prohibition in North America was especially just an unfortunate tool of racial oppression.
Yeah,
and that's the reason why to this day still that there's stigma, is because it was built up over time so long and hard and ingrained into society.
We had a good podcast episode a while back with a few lawyers. One of them, John Conroy, kind of spoke to the history of cannabis legalization. He was talking about how it started targeting Chinese people, which I didn't know that was a part of the history here in Canada. I knew that it was. I knew there's a lot of targeting, racial profiling towards Latinos and different parts of Mexicans in different parts of the U.S., but I didn't realize that there was also a targeting of Chinese people here in this country. So that was pretty eye-opening. And Don and Carol, who you mentioned, we've also had as a podcast episode in the past. That was a really fascinating discussion too.
The reason why I brought up Don and Carol is because they are the only two people. Listen to this, boys, okay? And I want anybody who's listening to this channel to hear the statement. They are the only two people that have operated a storefront openly in Vancouver and gone to jail for it. They went to jail for it. They had assets taken. They went to jail. They paid for it deeply, and it took them out of the game for a long time, and they had to get back on their own feet the way they could. So I definitely want to say that, when people ask me, where did things come from? Sorry, where are things going? I always say, well, first let's remember where things came from. And the fact that the way that I'm doing things right now, I'm doing it with all of the lessons learned from previous people that tried things like this. I don't sell cannabis. This space used to be operated as a venue. We don't operate as a public venue anymore. They used to even sometimes get liquor license. I stopped doing liquor license as of a couple of months ago. I took over the lease and now it's private residence. There's all these things that I've done to ensure that I'm not just operating some kind of space that is illegal dispensary of some sort. That's not what book club is. Book club is a private residence where I host gatherings for some of the most influential people in the business that I love hanging with. And it's not, we're just all a bunch of weed geeks, right? And we love what we do, and we do it because we've done it our whole lives. And, or maybe we just came into it, but everybody who comes here just has an authentic passion for product. And we just want to show off what we're all working on. Just like what Jeff did recently with bringing all the glass blowers in, all the amazing glass collectors and and some people that do make their own stuff. And it was amazing to see all the culture, and really that's really what book club is about. When people ask me what is book club, I say, look, yes, it's a private space where I hold gatherings, but it's about collaboration, it's about sharing IP, it's about creating a space where people who were maybe not, people weren't paying any attention to them because there's a bunch of big companies with big marketing budgets, and you're maybe a little company that's got fire flower but no money. This is a place where you can play equally with the big boys. We don't accept any sponsors on that night beyond people that want to come and show product. You want to come show product? You're my sponsor. I put you on the poster, and you're not paying me for that. You just come to my space because other people are going to be here, and we're after hours. We're sharing compliantly as adults, showing each other product compliantly after hours is a beautiful thing, man. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create a space that is as compliant as possible. That is like, we're definitely, my landlord knows exactly what I'm doing in here. They know that I smoke and that I dab. They know that I also have really badass ventilation that I've installed to ensure that smoke does not linger. I know Jeff was one of the major pushes for that. Him and all the dabbing people are like, man, we can't handle the dead smoke. I'm like, don't worry, man. I'm going to move it for you. And we did. And now we have a space that's 1 foot away from being a completely compliant consumption space. It's just not really open to the public. It's a private place for industry only, really. And it's, what can I tell you? I mean, Jeff and Sammy, you've both been here. You can both speak from personal experience what it's like to get back to our roots, how we used to be community, right?
In my opinion, it's a perfect pilot project for, in my eyes, how a consumption space should be presented and operated. How, in my opinion, it would look like if I were to open up a consumption space with the same kind of like vibes, you know what I mean? So
Jeff, I want to
go ahead.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, and then we went on a few tangents since, and I've been meaning to kind of bring it back.
Million tangents.
Yeah. You're talking about, trying to create consumption lounges and talking to politicians and receiving verbatim from some politician, there's nothing in it for me, so I'm not going to do this. Can you speak to that more? Like what, because politics is such a huge thing. Like what level of politics are we talking about? Like,
so just like local municipal government to get the conversation started and engaging like key players in like the Chamber of Commerce, for example. But, every time I go to meet with local politicians, I have to preload Tylenol and Advil, but I mean, not actually, but it's, I mean, you've probably talked to politicians, Adolfo, you have as well. It's not the most fun thing. And it can be quite,
I guess I mostly talk to bureaucrats, unless so like people on the.
It's all bureaucratic. It's all bureaucratic. No matter what level of government you are. I've talked to some like members of government in Vancouver when we were in Vancouver. I've talked to members of government in Coquitlam, and it's all the same thing. They're just,
I'll definitely say that my experience has been different, Jeff, but that's just like that.
So is mine.
It depends on the level of passion,
gangs,
I feel
right?
like.
Even some gangs that people are like, oh my God, people. I'm like, dude, I worked in downtown East Side. They're there. You meet them. And I can tell you that, like, even the crack dealers, some of them are people that I'm. Listen, I say this stuff and people get shocked because they don't come from the downtown East Side. If you're from my community, there's so many people that are in the game that are, and for me, like I'm observing these things that are government. People see it from the outside, just like downtown East Side. You see it from the outside, and you're like, oh, people see government from the outside. And Jeff, the thing is, buddy, maybe you've had some bad interactions with some people that were they were wearing that mask. And I know you're such a real dude that maybe you didn't vibe with it, man. But I've had very good luck working with members of the government that made me go, huh, there are a lot of people here that want exactly what I want. They want
That's the thing, though, is that Vancouver is a constantly changing dynamic city. And that although, things may not be going the direction that you want to see them go, because, Vancouver is kind of on a little bit of a decline in some places, has been for a while. But, you get those politicians who are engaging because they want to make change. But the thing in Coquitlam and the Tri-Cities is they don't give a shit. They just want to know that the status quo is good. The majority of the population is happy with the direction that it's going, and that let's not change the course that we're on because that would upset a bunch of people. So that's kind of the vibe that I felt like. It's not that I haven't gotten them that they're real. It's just they just want to put their hands behind their back and say things are working fine. I haven't got any complaints. Like, I don't see any reason to.
If I may kind of try to paraphrase what I think you're saying, Jeff. In Coquitlam and in the Tri-Cities, if a politician were to try to support you in pushing legislation around consumption lounges forward, that would harm their personal career. They would lose voters and so on and so forth. So they don't want to go and do that. Is that what it comes down to?
I mean, maybe that's a hidden thing that they're not really being forthcoming about, but it's more coming from a standpoint of, yeah, I support you on the surface. I tell you this is a good initiative. I agree with you. But am I going to do anything to further that initiative? Probably not. And then, even getting a letter of support from the Chamber of Commerce, multiple times the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce is like, yeah, I'm going to write you a letter of support on behalf of all the members. And I'm just like, so am I going to get that letter? And it's just kind of one of those things where it's a little bit discouraging that people are very supportive, then they'll tell you that they're supportive. But when it boils down to it, is that going to be the case? You really have to kind of figure that out for yourself. And so far, it's been quite discouraging. So now I think I have to really go in there and get one-on-ones with councillors and the mayor and really put the pressure on them and be like, hey, like I'm not going anywhere and I'm going to keep coming back until you make some kind of movement on this or tell me that you don't want to do this, because I don't care that you don't want to do it. I'm fine with that, but just tell me that you don't want to be on board with it and don't waste my freaking time. You know what I mean? I'm not in this to waste time. I'm more busy than I can even deal with myself. And, to have that kind of just fizzle kind of activity when I'm trying to push this conversation is a little bit discouraging, to say the least.
And so is your goal, Jeff, to create, I'll just call it like a book club type thing, a consumption lounge of sorts in the Tri-Cities area? Is that what you're trying to achieve?
No. Personally, I just want to see it happen. I don't care. I don't care myself right away to have a lounge. I want to, I'm not pushing it to make it happen for myself.
You're pushing it so that somebody could make it happen.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, it could be me and some other people, right? It could be me and some other people. It could be, a friend of mine, and then we, support each other in certain ways. My dab bar services, for example. But as far as I am concerned, I'm not pushing for myself to have a lounge or a consumption space, but I want it to happen really badly because I'm an events person myself. I mean, I like hosting events too, and it would be a great opportunity for me to have a space.
Yeah, but guys, let's be honest here. This is not about any one person having anything. This is about changing local bylaws.
Exactly.
Right?
I just want to see it happen, right?
Exactly. And I'm going to take a step back and again, reach into history. Hope I don't make anybody uncomfortable with this one. Shisha lounges. Shisha lounges. Okay? Persian culture is a big deal in Vancouver. We got lots of Persians here. They have conducted civil disobedience since time immemorial in this city. And by the way, I've noticed that they also do it in Toronto and in other places where they violate city bylaws. And they're like, look, dude, it's part of my culture. I need this space. This is having my shisha and my tea. That's where that's where a lot of Persians want to socialize. And that's culturally how it's done. So for them to tell them, no, your way of life is wrong. And I'm going to take another example now, okay? Because to this day, there's shisha lounges that are open in Burnaby and Vancouver, and the city needs to officially acknowledge that these places exist, give them licenses, acknowledge them, just like you need to acknowledge other consumption spaces like cannabis, smoke, and native culture. Now I need to go back there, okay? Because I'm Mexican, and in my culture, smoke has a very sacred meaning, okay? Inside spaces, yes, inside spaces, yes, we do all kinds of ceremonies inside spaces. You have to make an inside space sacred sometimes, and you need traditional incense and you need traditional herbs to burn inside of your space to do the purification ceremony. So when somebody tells me that I can't have smoke inside of a space and that that's illegal, I say we've gone a little bit off the tracks, because we need to create spaces that are culturally sensitive to other people's traditions, okay? And when people are like, well, you know what, cannabis doesn't really fall within that, it's not really traditional, I say, what the living fuck? What is more traditional to people everywhere in the world than cannabis? You tell me one plant that has more history with me as a Mexican. If you're going to tell me as a Mexican that it's not part of my traditional culture and this has been with me for 500 fucking years, and you're going to tell me that? No, man. You're going to say that to a Jamaican. I have a Jamaican friend that lives down the street. You're going to tell my Jamaican friend that he can't consume ganja, his sacred herb, in his space. You're going to tell me that's illegal. I'm going to say to you that this is a moment where we, the populace, needs to stand up, just like I have been doing since the first day that I got to this country, where fortunately I was under the protection of the federal government. And then I realized that the limitations of what I was allowed to do growing cannabis wasn't enough to actually provide safe and secure access to the patient population. And that's why I changed my life the way that I did. This is another moment where very clearly people like Jeff and I are observing that there is a social need. We've got cannabis laws that allow us to purchase cannabis. Okay? We've done that. We've crossed that line. And now we're saying, yeah, but you can't smoke in most public spaces, in no provincial parks. Really, you have to bother people. The law is you have to go on the street and smoke in places somebody's going to walk by and not be so stoked on it. And I'll be honest with you, here in Vancouver, it doesn't happen that much because we've broken people in. But smoke a joint on the street in Victoria. Go do that. Go do it. See what it feels like to smoke a joint in Victoria instead of Vancouver. Because you're going to experience people looking at you funny, and an old person's going to stop and tell you, ew, please don't do that in front of me. Because I've had that happen to me 5 times in Victoria, because I'm always smoking weed everywhere in Victoria, and it's a different culture down there. And so what I'm saying is that, just like Jeff was saying, I want these laws to change in BC, not for me. And Vancouver, frankly, they're turning a blind eye left and right. This is a BC thing. The province needs this.
So okay, so let's run with that tangent that you're bringing up there. Like what's missing? What's missing to enable? Is this purely a municipal thing? Is this like a BC provincial level thing? Like where in the legislative policy kind of world do each of you think the changes really need to happen to allow?
I believe the municipality. I believe the municipality would have the power to challenge that, and if not, I'm sure that the province does.
But there's a bunch of different moving parts. I was talking to some people that are in policy making that had a hand in some stuff in BC with the Cannabis Act or whatever. But anyways, they were saying it boils down to you need to have work safe and occupational health and safety. You need to have insurance underwriters on board with it. You need to have municipal bylaws that have been written and put into place. Then the BC government with their smoking laws related to that needs to be adjusted. So there's a whole bunch of different levels of government that need to kind of come together, or different government organizations that need to come together and figure this out, which is why it's one big, like, pardon my language, but it's a big shit show that no one's really bothered to deal with, because it's like you need to deal with so many isolated compartments to make this actually work. And that's why it's such a big headache. And, each part plays an equally important part in this whole, moving picture of cannabis lounges and consumption spaces. That's why it hasn't been done yet, is because we've kind of put ourselves, or I guess the government has put itself into a situation where their hands are tied because there's another part of it that needs to be done. So that's why I'm slowly but surely, gathering the right people and the right stuff together to, give that framework to WorkSafe, give that framework to the bylaws, give that framework to the BC government, have case studies like Book Club where, look, we can move X amount of air out of here, or we can start with vaping, like there's so many different ways that we could skin a cat when it comes to creating consumption spaces in BC, and how to soften the landing for the BC government when it comes to that, because offering vaping instead of smoking to start out with, right? That's an important part, just to kind of get their feet wet. And then eventually when we show, hey, we can move this much air out of here to make it, like these are the particulate levels that are acceptable in, an industry that has a lot of smoke and combustion, in, like welding, for example, right? If you can move that much air out of a welder's working area, then you can move that much air out of a smoker's area, then it's going to have the same, benefit. And then they can see that. So drawing on different areas, different industries, case studies, examples, and really spoon feeding them that legislation and the framework to let them just sign off on it, coming from a harm reduction standpoint. There's so many different benefits. If the government as a whole were a person, I just want to grab them by the throat and shake them and say, "What the haven't you done this yet?" It's such a simple no-brainer, but I understand after coming at it myself why they haven't done it, because there are so many moving parts that give them a headache to even think about, let alone the people that are trying to push it, like me, Adolfo, and everybody else that wants to see it happen. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I would like it to happen, but it seems like it's going to be slow. I am gathering people that will kind of want to be on board with it and kind of help out and write frameworks and push that. So, but yeah, that's my rant about it.
Anything to add, Adolfo, on the kind of more policy legislative side?
I think Jeff is bang on. I mean, I've already started work on my case study for. I'm doing probably both a petition and a case study to get ready for whatever is to come, because even though this is a private residence and there's really no existing bylaws that would prohibit me from doing what I'm actively doing, I still want to contribute towards the fight of changing the mind of City Hall and the municipality and the province, the federal government, if we need to. You made a really good question, Sammy. Exactly where do we have to tackle? Where do we have to go and have those talks with those reasonable people that I'm sure we will be able to find? So, and like you were saying, Jeff, let's just come correct with paperwork, and that's
if we get a petition going, I think it's like 10% of BC voter or something, we can get a referendum or something. I was reading. I'm not 100% sure on that,
but more of a local petition here.
Hey, but that's the thing, is that if we can come at it like an electronic petition and force that change, then they're kind of forced to have a referendum on that.
10% is a large.
It is a very large undertaking, but you know what?
Marketing dollars, sir. So yeah, let's go find that funder.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, there's been plenty of referendums in the past. You just need to get people passionate about it, and like you said, marketing dollars, it's a win-win for everybody too. I mean, it's a win for the people that hate cannabis. It's a win for the people that love cannabis. So it's a win for the government. Why not, right?
And I think that's something really interesting that you guys talked about that I never really considered before, that anybody who is not into cannabis could be into consumption lounges. And I think anybody who's not into cannabis, when they first hear consumption lounge, they're going to be like, no, we don't need that. But if you're able to, before they react, be like, consumption lounge, because the people who you don't want to be around go away to a specific place. I feel like that's a thing that could be really powerful to bring people who are against cannabis on board. It's like, hey, you don't like cannabis, it's not going away. You've probably realized that by now. So why don't you support consumption lounges to make sure that you don't have to interact with the people you don't want to interact with? That's a very interesting kind of.
I actually, I forgot to mention that I actually I emailed the RCMP, okay? And I said to them, can you please tell me, statistic-wise, the amount of violent or criminal activity that you've had a response to proportionally to other drugs and then alcohol and then cannabis. And they said, sorry, there's not enough data relating to cannabis for us to give you anything. Like, we haven't had enough, violent or criminal activities related to cannabis to actually give you those statistics. And I said, perfect. I was like, that's all I need to know. You know what I mean? So, I mean, like, consumption spaces, like, statistically do not, lead to any criminal activity. Like, what's the only criminal activity? You sell your friend a bag of weed? Like, come on. That's only criminal because they say it's criminal.
What it will lead to is an increase in the amount of money that the local restaurants and convenience stores make.
Exactly. Wasted tourism dollars, wasted local money that could have been put back into the community. Just it just frustrates me so much.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're at time here, more or less. I would like to give you guys the floor to share any final thoughts or salient whimsical musings that that you think are relevant to share here before we part ways and wrap this thing up.
Jeff,
Either you guys.
Honestly, no. I pretty much covered everything. Calling out the government for being a bunch of snails, and like how much of a hassle it is to try and get these consumption lounges implemented. It will happen. I know it'll happen because when it was 2012 and then Colorado just legalized cannabis, I said that is going to happen in Canada. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen in Canada. And sure enough, we got it, although it's not exactly what we want right now. But I mean, for us to be able to come in now and then, be noticed and recognized while these big companies with tons of money are going down and these smaller people with the community effort are going up, it's the tides are changing, and eventually things are going to be the way that we want them to be, but it's going to boil down to, are we willing to all put in the work, which of course we are, and just being able to push those conversations and get in to these getting into these government organizations and making changes, going in from the inside and pushing them to go in the right direction is another way that people have, gone about that.
Has Colorado legalized consumption lounges?
I don't know. I personally don't know. I know California has.
Okay, I didn't know that. So there is precedence in the U.S. of certain jurisdictions legalizing.
Yeah, I think it's very limited, but there is this place. I think it's called the Woods, and I think it's Woody Harrelson had opened that up, and it's a consumption space with really nice decor, really nice vibes. Like, it's a beautiful spot, and I personally would love to see places like that be here. It's got like an outdoor pool. Imagine like hitting a dab and then being able to go for a swim. Like, that's like being able to have a space and then create what you want there without that kind of restriction is going to be that magical puzzle piece of legalization that when it does happen, everyone's going to be like, finally, this is what we wanted, aside from the other things that need to happen. But that's kind of my approach.
And again,
Adolfo, what are your final thoughts?
Again, as somebody with over a decade of experience running spaces like these on the day-to-day basis, they are not dangerous. You do not have altercations. It is not a bar. It doesn't have the same risks as a bar. It creates a very different social ambiance around the establishment. The type of people who frequent bring a new blood to the neighborhood where the establishment is at. All of the local restaurants do better. All of the local businesses do better. More security. It's nothing but positive. There is absolutely no downside to this. As long as you are ventilating accordingly, there's very little that can be said to stop this from happening in a legitimate fashion. So I really hope that we see that day. And again, thank you so much for giving us the time to discuss this on your show. And shout out to all the people growing and extracting fire. Remember, you don't have to spend a big budget to come connect with all of your community. Your community is here in one place. Come and join us. bring your dankety dankest and let's have some fun together. Okay.
That's
Cool,
awesome.
guys. Well, thank you so much for being here today. If you enjoyed this episode, we appreciate a like and subscribe to our channel. We are going to be taking a break from the Statecraft for the next month or two. Statecraft's been booked to curate talks and music and spaces at a few different conferences over the next couple months here. So we're just going to focus on that, and we will likely be back sometime in June, though maybe it'll be later. But I expect mid-June we'll have our next State of Craft podcast. So yeah, you'll hear more from us once we ramp things up again. And Adolfo and Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for
Thank you
being
for
here
having us.
today. I am a little sad that Cameron took off. Cameron's from the LCRB and made the comments around the celebrating the culture and not being down with that and taking off right away. I think just his biases, and this is kind of one of the challenges with government. There's a lot of people who are really, really understanding and like come with open eyes and open ears, want to learn and listen. But then there's people who come with the biases that they have, and they just like see everything through a particular lens.
That's the way I've seen a lot of like the normal society kind of the mindset has been. Unfortunately, is that I kind of got reminiscent of that.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope those people, the people in the world who have kind of a more conservative outlook, all it takes is just actually listening and trying to hear instead of listening to the words and then interpreting it based off of the biases that you have. Because if he'd stuck around even 5 minutes longer, he might have recognized like, oh, it wasn't actually celebration; it was just talking about history, honestly. So that's my hope and intention I'll put out there, that all the people who are in influential places, being part of government, if they are really against cannabis for historical reasons, or stigma reasons, that they can listen openly and at least try to understand the perspective of people who are quite different from them. And I think that would help the goals that we're talking about here of wanting to achieve. I think that would make it happen much more quickly if but to your point, Adolfo, there's been many lovely people in government that I've had the pleasure of working with who get it, try to make things better, and are really frustrated that they can't because they are mired by the realities of government around them. They like can't really influence in any significant way. So it's a challenge for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. James Rorda, he said it beautifully there. Listen to understand, not to respond. I love that way of framing it. All right, guys. Well, it's a pleasure. I'll see you both next week at the BC Cannabis Summit.
Looking forward to
Jeff,
it.
I sent you a text. Respond to me.
Okay, sounds good, man.
And yeah, we'll chat later, dudes.
Hasta luego.
Everybody, thank you for the good run so far this year. We'll be back in a few months here.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.